Hey there, I have some interesting things to tell you. I've been researching the Dogman phenomenon, and I came across an account from 1887 that involves a small group of lumberjacks in Northern California. From what I've learned, these 6 lumberjacks were exploring a new logging area when they saw tall animals appear out of the trees, run across the paths, and then disappear. They said these things had very big teeth, walked straight, were black, and had very pointed ears. They were all very scared by this. However, their foreman chose to keep going. They kept seeing these things in the same place, but they would always run away before they could do much. These animals are called a number of different names, such as timber beasts and the lumberjack devil. Over time, as they spread out in this area, they started to see these creatures more and more often. The first impressions were of a dowry-wearing duck. The boss didn't believe them, so they kept going. 2 of the 6 lumberjacks went missing at some point. I think it was about 3 months into the job, but we never were able to find them. They were nowhere to be found, and the other 4 lumberjacks gave up on the growth completely. The foreman couldn't find any more willing lumberjacks to work, which could be seen as either a bad or a good thing. The stories were very scary, though. He went out there to look around and tried to find the lost lumberjacks. When he finally came back, he said that he had seen the same strange creatures that his crew had. I really wanted to let you know that the foreman was my great-grandfather, and I have written records of his 3-page terrifying encounter with these things. Based on his writing, they apparently almost killed him, and he thinks he accidentally walked onto some of their territory, where they were very hostile toward him. A lot of dense forest and wild land that had never been touched by humans. I think this is more of a story than anything else, but I think some locals wouldn't even go out here because they were afraid of these animals. I don't know about you, but I find the stories very interesting. My grandma has these journals, and even though I read them a long time ago, I might be able to find them and write you the stories he wrote. But I want to be careful. A lot of other people have told me that their photos and videos were taken away, or even worse, that they were questioned. For that reason, I want to keep this as secret as possible. The loneliest man in the world. I'll be calling you soon. About 30 miles outside of Phoenix, Arizona, and just south of Route 85, is the Buckeye Creek Wilderness. One guy who lives in the area says that it is called Death Valley and that there are many more coyotes and mountain lions in this wild area. He even says it's full of werewolves, but he makes it clear that it's not like a werewolf in a movie. In real life, these are dogs. What did he really see? It looked like a person running across the road on all 4s. He also said that when he saw the creature, it quickly disappeared into some bushes and then came back much closer to his truck. He thinks that the creature was making fun of him. The man said he had seen this thing 3 times and had gone back to the spot where he first saw it. He never saw it again, but he and many of his friends saw other strange things, like lights in the sky that didn't look like they should be there, but mostly. He then says that the last time he went out there, he found tracks that looked like they were made by people, but they were really big and looked more like dog tracks. He talks about the scariest thing that happened to him. We were going back because I had someone with me. We're not going to waste time driving out there. He says yes and no when asked if they got pictures or videos of what he says. We did take pictures of some of the things we saw, but not of this wolf-like thing. People have asked him if the person dressed up as a monster could have been playing a joke on him or planning a Halloween trick. He says it was definitely real. As a child, I had to walk up a hill every day to get home from school. Here is a back road or trail that goes through the woods. There used to be an old house that was left empty there. It had been left empty for a very long time, many years. We're shocked that it hadn't completely fallen apart from the weather. As my friends and I walked down the hill one day on our way home, we saw something big moving around this old house. There were dog ears on top of its head, and it looked like it was hunched over and watching us from behind some trees. It looked like a big person. As we saw this thing, I pointed it out, and then ran back up the hill to my house with my friends right behind me. We ran into our homes as soon as we got there because we were scared. We made up our minds that we would never go back down that road again. But after a few years, my friends and I chose to go back down the road where we saw what we all thought was a monster. The old house was still there, but it looked worse than before. It had more damage and graffiti. It was clear that homeless people had been around here at some point, since there was trash and writing. I had fully grown over, and it was worse than before. We chose to go inside this house just to look around, because it was getting dark and we were curious and fake brazen at the same time. We told each other over and over that the monster lived inside this. When we got inside, everything was dirty, broken, and left behind. We looked around and tried to find the first floor. Upstairs, we heard a big sound, then moved around. We stopped moving for a second, and it sounded like something was slowly going down the stairs. Now we chose to run out the house window and back to where we came from. It scared us to think about what it might have been. And it was definitely one of the scariest times my friends and I saw something strange as kids. I don't have any proof that this was the same animal, or maybe some kind of monster, but it sounded very heavy. It was like he or she was trying to be extra quiet and sneak down, but the house is so old that everything kind of groaned and creaked. My friends and I saw a strange creature many years ago. It was something we had never seen before and didn't belong there. It was a cold morning in October. It was 1977 when I saw it for the first time. At the time, I was 6 or 7 years old, and my older sister Stacy had just started high school. We lived in a house on the edge of Klamath Falls, Oregon, close to an area with a lot of trees that we called the Back 40. Yemnit? The Back 40 was mostly empty, but it was next to a big farmhouse and a well-kept dirt road. This area, which was mostly wild land and trees, was called the Back 40. It covered at least 40 to 50 acres. Back then, my mom had 2 dogs. One was named Jellybean, and the other was Sally Mae. They were both small mutts. I woke up early that morning and went outside to get cereal for breakfast. While I was there, I saw something big moving through the garden. The blueberry bushes in Oregon were moving back and forth because it was blueberry season. That's why I naturally thought it was a big animal, maybe a stag. But then, something forward came out. It looked like a big dog. At first, I thought it was a neighbor's dog, but then it got close enough for me to see its face. As I went to get the cereal, I stopped in my tracks and felt sick to my stomach. I can't say why, but I was pulled to the back door and even went outside. I thought I was in a dream because I couldn't control my thoughts or movements. It felt like this thing was pulling me toward it. Its nose was longer like a deer's, and it had sharp teeth sticking out from behind its lips, kind of like fangs, but all over. It had very deep set-in eyes. It had black hair like the night, and its eyes were of bright yellow. It was scary and not normal. The thing kept going in my direction. With each step, I could make out what seemed to be a human shape with animal features. It stood straight up like a person, but it looked like a wolf. It looked like a wolf and had dark gray fur all over its body. It looked like the animal was a lot bigger than a normal wolf should have been, she told the gallery. Then it sat down on all fours, with its head about 3 feet off the ground. It then stood back up on 2 legs, as if it wasn't sure if it wanted to be on 2 legs or all fours. It got closer and closer, and I found that I could feel everything again. That's the only way I can explain it. I ran inside and told my mom. Even though she didn't believe me at first, she could tell I was upset, so she went outside to comfort me. There, she saw the same thing, standing on 2 legs as before, far away, and looked over at our house, turned around, and walked away toward the Back 40. Animal control finally came a few hours after my mom called them. I think they looked in almost every part of that forest but didn't find anything too strange, The only thing they did find were some very large wolf prints, which I think were the biggest wolf prints ever found in Oregon. Yet on the one hand, they admit that, short of a 0.1%, work is more likely to be made by humans than by apes. Even my sister Stacy said that the driver of her bus had seen some strange, very big dogs in the area. I asked my mom if it was possible that, I don't know, we were living close to an opening of some kind. She quickly told me that portals don't exist and that I was probably just dreaming, because I woke up early when I should have been sleeping. At least what I remember this story is true. It took place in Klamath Falls, Oregon. Why am I telling you this? Because recently, several people in Northern California have said they have seen dogmen. The scenery is a lot like Southern Oregon's, especially in the high desert areas that are covered in thick forests and canyons. I still don't know what to think about this memory as an adult. During my trip to the Oregon coast, I may have had the scariest thing happen to me ever. We were on our way back from Astoria late at night. There it was, a huge wolf-like creature appearing out of nowhere in a parking lot near the beach. We were about to stop for coffee before going home. He began to howl and run quickly toward our car. The thing my son caught scared him and made him point out the window as the place where it came from. The next thing I know, it's coming straight at our car with its arms out. My doors were locked, but I don't know what it was. I was always nervous as I looked over my shoulder every time we flew to a new coast spot that night and stopped somewhere. It was like I could still see it running in my rearview mirror, even though I probably didn't see it. It moved quickly and was very strong. Ooh. Every time I sped away from this thing, it would catch up and then go away. Every time it came close to the window, it made me feel like time was slowing down. But it wasn't. It even took my foot off the gas at that point. My wife was scared and confused, and she didn't know what to do except scream that a big wolf was chasing our car. Since we couldn't get home that night, we didn't think it was safe when we got back to our hotel. It was all we could talk about with our son. The people we told didn't believe us when we told them what came up. This thing looked a lot like a huge growling monster. It had a long nose and really big teeth. When it got close to the driver's side door, it made a terrible screech. In a fear, I tried to get away from that thing. I really don't remember much about the whole thing. It was after us that night, but I don't know what it was. I've told my story to a lot of people who aren't very interested so far, but this is the most true account of what happened. This thing walked on two legs like a person, but it looked like a dog. It looked like it could jump over and get over the cars across from where we parked on Mars. It looked a bit like a wolf-dog mix because its eyes were bright yellow. I'm not sure. There may be a link between all of these stories. No matter what it was, he scared me a lot, and I still get scared driving at night. In general, I wanted to leave because I was very scared. It's clear that this thing could have killed us if it wanted to, so I think it was just messing with us. I'm sorry, but I'm not a great writer. I just wanted to quickly write down my thoughts in case you can figure out what they mean by reading between the lines of my really bad writing. Anyway, it scares me to think about how close we were to dying that night. I've never been scared of anything in particular. Exercise. Begin by reading 3 lines of script. Everything changed on July 18th, 2018. I always thought that people who said they saw things like this were making it up. However, what happened to me has changed the way I see things totally. I was walking home from work as the manager of a small convenience shop in town around 7 o'clock at night. The day was mostly cloudy and it was getting dark when I started to walk. It takes me about 10 to 15 minutes to walk from my store in town to my house in the country. As I started to walk along a huge field that has been empty for as long as I can remember, this huge dog that looked like a monster came out of the woods on the other side of the field. It jumped out at full speed and started chasing me, running after me. All I could see were its eyes, teeth, and paws. It looked like a vampire or something, but I think it was more like a wolf. Grabbing an icy little, it ran after me while I screamed. It stopped chasing me in the end. My mom told me that she could hear the screams from inside the house when I got home. The sound was like a strange animal's scream or a high-pitched noise. In April, a few months before this story takes place, I saw something very strange in my yard one morning. There were big footprints all over my yard, and the grass was all ripped out in two different areas that were about 20 feet apart. The prints were so big that I couldn't even put my hand on them. When I put my hand on the ground, these wolf prints were probably a lot bigger than I thought they would be. As you might expect, all of that is still making me pretty scared. This has all happened almost 3 years ago, and I'm still shocked by what it was and what it could have been. I would have told you a while ago that this kind of thing would never scare me, but this fear still scares me when I think about it. Before the pandemic, I was on a walk with my girlfriend one night just outside of Portland, Oregon. I stopped walking when I heard what sounded like bushes moving. From the corner of my eye, I saw something dark moving in the distance. I thought someone might have jumped us. First, I'd like to say that this is a true story about some people I met. For fear that people will think I'm crazy, whatever it was, it looked like an animal, but it was still too dark to see any details. For some reason, my girlfriend demanded we keep walking, even though she saw something too. To be honest, I don't know if it would have chased us or not, because I told her we should go back because I saw how scared she was and knew how she was with dogs. During the whole time I was facing this thing, it didn't make any noise other than the rustling of trees and a light breeze. It had very bright eyes and followed us as we walked away. Owen McCurwin. That being said, I saw something dark and dog-like. I'm not sure what it was or what it wanted. I'm sure that something strange is going on in these more out-of-the-way places. Did I say that its eyes were very bright? Other than a general silhouette, the rest of it was still too dark to make out. It looked like a big dog-sized figure. Following a few days, my girlfriend and I drove back to the spot where we had seen the creature, mostly because we were curious. We went very early in the morning when there were no other people around. This doesn't make a lot of sense now. Perhaps going for a walk that early in the morning would not have scared any demon dogmans that might be out there. In any case, when we got to our goal, all we saw were trees and bushes. After driving around without a plan for about 20 minutes, I got the feeling that someone or something was watching us. Things got even worse when my girlfriend started to freak out and say she felt like someone was also following her. While we were almost back at my house, I sped up. The moment we got back home and went inside, my lover said she was sure someone had followed us. She still says it's true. Also, both of our phones were acting very strangely while we were out here. The night we went for a walk, and the morning we drove back count. There would be a strange staticky sound coming from our cell phones. Even though it was very strange, I looked up dogmen and other animals that looked like what I saw that night. A lot of people have seen them in states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and more. Many reports have been made of a strange black figure standing outside windows at night. Some people think these are sightings of the dogman, while others are sure they are meetings with completely different hybrid beings." End quote. The descriptions range from a standing animal that walks on all fours to something that looks a lot more like a person but still looks like a wolf. Things like this have never made sense to me, but there was something strange outside that night. When you go into the bush at night, be careful and bring a flashlight and a gun. I don't know what it was. It looks like we should have stayed inside and maybe watched a movie, but sometimes our interest gets the best of us when it comes to the unknown. It's been on my mind to write you and tell you about the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. I don't know how to explain what I saw, and I don't usually believe things like that. I really hope that you can help me after reading your stories. William Reith. My name is Mike, and this is the perfect time to be proud of coming from a small town. When I was 21, I worked for my dad in our wood business. That was about 10 years ago. That summer, we had a lot of work, which kept us busy. I will always remember this night as one of the strangest, scariest, and most confusing nights I've ever had. I was sound asleep at home when I got a call around 1 a.m. telling me to come into work early. The next shift had an odd number of extra trucks, and they needed someone to make sure they were properly held out. When I woke up, I told my wife not to wait up because I would be home late. I ran to my truck and got away. My house was about an hour's drive from work, so it took me a little while to get there. A lot of coffee helped me drive. When I got there, pulling around back, everything was already going. People were getting ready and moving things around. As soon as I walked in, they turned their attention to me because I was the only one there. Even though everyone was busy, they all looked like something wasn't quite right. There was something strange. Again, they looked down at what they were doing. As the trucks came in, I was asked to help park them. It looked like something strange was going on. It was like you could feel it in the air. There was something off about the office that night. I don't know why. This isn't normal for a logging company where everyone knows each other well and there aren't any secrets or strange things going on. You could feel it everywhere. What was it that made everyone look so serious? I thought it had to be pretty important to get everyone to look that way at work in the middle of the night. I did some of my work outside after being told to park some trucks. It was now about 3 a.m. I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing at this point when all of a sudden I hear a horrible scream that didn't sound like any animal I've ever heard. That sound was so strange I can't even begin to describe it. A woman yelling, but with more force and pitch behind it. It was very high in pitch and very loud. I sent a radio message to my boss, who I didn't like and who my dad hired to run the area around here. I told him, "Hey, did you hear that? Someone is probably in trouble." He ignored my answer though. He didn't give me anything. Someone at work even tried to tell me about it, but they wouldn't admit it. Now there was no doubt that something was wrong. When I was done with my job, I went back to the office. A few of us were scared and wanted to know what was going on. Even though I had to wait, my boss took me away and told me what was going on. A few of the workers at the site have said in the last 2 weeks that they have seen big humanoid figures off in the distance. I laughed and asked if this was a joke. The person I worked for looked very worried, and they said they could hear weird screams and noises. That part of the reason I was called into work this early was because there was extra work, since many workers are now not showing up because of this event. At first, my boss or supervisor wouldn't admit that something was wrong because they didn't want to spread more fear among the workers. He asked if we should call the cops or animal control or something. I told him that would be fine. He gave her a shaky head and said that things are much more complex than that. He spoke in a way that I didn't understand. It felt like the man was telling me puzzles, or if I asked him a question, he would answer it with a rhetorical question. But I didn't see one of these things for real until about 4:30 that morning. It was looking at a small pile of sticks, just out of sight of the light while watching me. The light was dim enough for me to make out what it was. I don't want to say it because it seems so unlikely that it makes my story sound silly. It looked like this thing was a real monster. It made me think of the movie Dog Soldiers. That's how it looked. It was tall, and its eyes seemed to glow. I yelled at it because I thought it might be a crazy person dressing up as Halloween, but before I could say anything, it was gone. I quickly told my boss I was done and was going home because that was enough for me. In the evening, I had to tell the old man I was leaving my job. It was fun to explain that to my wife. That was one of the scariest things I've ever seen or dealt with. I work in a totally different field now, so I haven't seen or dealt with any of these things since. I still don't know what I saw. I do not want to know. It doesn't bother me. I would really like to forget about this memory. I think that putting it down will help me get it out of my system. While I was 14 or 15 years old, I lived in a town on the edge of Vancouver Island. Ladysmith is famous for its mining past and for being the site of the first trans-Pacific telegraph cable, which linked North America and Asia. It is also praised for being an important historical site. The one more thing makes it famous. Okay, so let me tell you what happened. I went camping with some friends in my backyard, which is mostly woods with a few houses here and there. We would play games or just hang out during the day. At night, we would often stay around a fire until about 2 in the morning when everyone would go home. It wasn't any different this night. While my friends left, I stayed by the fire for a while longer until I was tired enough to go to bed. The event took place after I lay in bed and turned on the light. There was light coming in from outside because I was lying with my back against the window and my face against the wall. I could see a big shadow or shape coming toward my window, which I thought was a person. It came up very quickly, which scared me. I thought someone was running right up to my window. As soon as I turned to see what was going on, I saw this huge dog face pressing up against my window. I was so scared I almost passed out. The animal pressed its face against the window so hard that snot came out. It was the most ugly and scary dog face I've ever seen, and it was staring right at me. It had a snarl that looked sickly. I felt scared. I was too scared to even scream. It looked like it really wanted me to make some noise, but I was too scared to do anything. It just stared at me with that ugly face and growled, snarled, and grimaced through the window for what seemed like an hour. Then it put its hands up on the glass. Hands. The thing's hands looked a bit like a raccoon's. They were dark and each finger had a claw on it. As he looked at it, it seemed to be looking for a weak spot or a way to open the window. It would scrape against the glass as if it were trying to play. Then it would try to pull the window up by digging its claws into the edges of it. You could tell it was getting upset because it just couldn't get it. I was scared that I would not be able to get out of bed. I was completely pale and sure this was the end. In such a short amount of time, this thing turned mean, like it was trying to break through my window, and then it vanished into the night, leaving everything quiet. Not even crickets could be heard. As soon as it was gone, I woke up my parents. They quickly brushed off any idea that this was even remotely true. They thought she was having bad dreams at night. They said stupid things like, I should drink warm milk before bed. I have no idea. They didn't even bother to look at the damage to my window. Too much of their attention was on getting me back to my room to sleep. I didn't really tell anyone until now. Since I just moved out of that house a short time ago, there were scratch marks on the edge of our window when my parents drove away, and we looked outside. It looked like it had tried to get in. A dog could not have made those marks unless it was as big as a bear, which is not possible because dogs are not that big. It wasn't even normal. It was scary in every way and looked like something from hell. After seeing that, I don't think I'm the same person. For sure, I think that something evil was trying to get into my house. It's hard for me to believe what it would have done if it had tried to go back through the back door or my other window. Also, where did it come from if it was going to chase me right up to my window? Why was I picked out? Why not when I was at the campfire with my friends? Was it waiting for the right time to attack after seeing me? I still have a lot of questions. The story I'm about to tell you took place in the 1990s, around 1994. Both of us had jobs. My husband carried furniture to stores from a warehouse, and I cleaned houses. Our jobs paid okay, but we never had a lot of freedom in our lives. We were able to keep our house over our heads and food in the fridge, though. Certainly not wealthy in any way. The family that owned the warehouse where my husband worked was very rich, and their house in Big Bear was really nice. When they got back from family trips up there, I'd clean it for them. When that happened, our family would go on its own trip. They went there at least 4 times a year, which meant we would go 4 times too. We always planned to leave on Thursday and get back on Monday morning. Our family knew what we did. It was their plan after all. Most of the time, we'd just chill out and enjoy ourselves, which we couldn't do at home. Back then, our daughter was young, so I loved the idea of taking her for walks in the woods and letting her enjoy the fresh air and trees. It was nice. Up until the day we had to leave, we had a good time. I was going to start cleaning that day. I had to clean up the house after a family party for the 4th of July one summer. My daughter was about 4 or 5 years old. We left at noon and got there at 7 p.m. The house had 3 floors, but the kitchen and living room were on the 2nd floor. Rooms on the 1st and 3rd floors. The first one was her favorite because it had a room with a trunk full of games and toys. It was pretty far away from everything else, and if you walked far enough in the backyard, you would reach a lake. on the 3rd floor. You could even see it from the garden. Anyway, my husband went to bed early one night, but my daughter couldn't fall asleep. I let her play with some toys downstairs. I watched TV in the living room upstairs. She cries as she runs into the room. I asked her what was wrong and if she was hurt, but she said she was scared. She said that she saw something outside the window and heard a big dog barking at her. When she told me she saw a wild animal, I told her not to worry. She didn't want to show me when I asked her to. To be honest, I was shocked. My daughter loves pets, but this really scary dog scared her. I kissed her and told her to go see Daddy upstairs. I would check on her and make sure it was gone. I went downstairs and she went upstairs. There was a deck off the back of the 1st floor. As I looked out at the yard, I opened the door, went outside, and turned on the lights. Outside, there was a terrible smell, like sulfur or urine, and feel something strong and itchy at the back of my nose. The deck was wet, but it hadn't rained in days, so I looked down. It was what I saw on the decks, though, that really got to me. I thought they looked like a dog's, but there were 2 things that stood out. The first was the shape. They looked like paws, but were much bigger, also longer. Next, there are the tracks themselves. No, this thing wasn't walking on 4 legs. It only had 2. In the dark, I wasn't sure, but the way they were spaced out didn't make me think of a dog, as my daughter said. The prince walked across the deck and down the steps. I got a flashlight by going inside. It made me wonder if it was trying to get into the shed or the trash cans. The prince led me to the end of the deck and down the stairs, where I saw that the ground was wet. I kept following the prince to the front of the house, where they stopped. I just stood there and looked into the dark while I listened. Soon, I heard something rumbling above me. I pointed my flashlight at the roof, which was sloped and close to the ground. There it was, sitting on shingles. It had this face like a German shepherd, but much bigger, and was letting water drip. Like a bat's, its ears were straight up and sharp, but not as thick. There was a growl coming from the eyes, which were a bright yellow color like hot coals. I thought it might be a sick dog because I couldn't see well. I started to yell and wave my arms around to scare it. I thought that if I claimed to be bigger, it would leave. Then this rough-looking animal stood up on its hind legs. From the roof, it was so tall that it looked like 3 of me put together. It was very angry and had its teeth bared. I could see its body with my flashlight. It had some hair on its large white chest, but not all of it was hairy. A red spot on one of its arms looked like it had been hurt. It looked like it had mange. Almost all of its hair was gone, and when the light was on its eyes, they seemed to be shining. I was scared at that very time. I thought I was having a bad dream because there was a demon from another world looking at me. I thought I had been frozen there for all time. I finally took a step back, but I tripped and hit my back. When the flashlight hit the ground, I could no longer see what was going on. In the dim moonlight, all I could make out was a shape. I began to walk backwards, being careful not to make any quick movements that might have upset whatever it was. I think it jumped at least 10 feet into the air and over me. It landed behind me and ran into the bush. I quickly got to my feet, ran to the front door, and rushed inside as fast as I could. As I started to go up the stairs, I locked the door behind me and saw my daughter come down to see me. She asked if the scary dog was still there. I was shaking and sweating from the whole thing. I told her it was gone. Things are going to be fine. I was scared there after that day. When we went to Big Bear, my wife would always ask me why I was so tense. It even got us into fights. The fight stopped when the family sold the house, but I'll never forget what happened there. What I saw that day really made me think of bad dreams and scary movies. It seemed so strange, but it was real at the same time. Some people might say I was wrong, but with everything I told you, what other animal could it have been? You know what I saw? I live in Vermont in a ridiculously small town called Jay, which is right next to the border with Canada. Not only does the town not have many companies, but Jay State Forest and Jay Peak completely block our view. We're not very far from anywhere else. Christmas Day, my mom and I were the only ones there. I'm no longer a kid. Of course, a kid. However, I'm not really excited for Christmas to arrive. We knew it would be a slow year, so we just picked out some movies to watch and cooked 2 steaks for dinner. A moose or family of deer would often come through the bush next to our house in this part of Vermont. Because it was a holiday, the town was less busy than normal. More raccoons and bears than normal came down because they were hungry in Vermont's cold winter. Trash cans being hit became something you heard every day, and this Christmas was no different. My sister lives in New York City right now, so we FaceTimed with her. We also talked to a California aunt. The day wasn't too exciting, and the food was good, but it was dinner like every other day. We gave each other a few gifts, but that wasn't enough for us. My mom going to sleep would let me play video games without making me feel like I wasn't paying attention to her. The PS4 was in the living room, which had a view of the road in front of the house. The forest is across the road from where the road goes. The TV was placed in the corner next to the window, so even when you're focused on a game, you can see what's going on outside. I heard more trash cans banging around in front of the house around 11 p.m. after Mom had been asleep for a while. After taking out the trash, I found the dinner scraps inside. I thought it was a squirrel trying to get something from the bones to take back to its family. It seemed like something was digging to the bottom as I tried to ignore the noise. I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. It wasn't a squirrel, so I knew it was probably a bear. If it was something, I thought I should check it out. I was pretty sure that if I scared it, it would just run away and not get angry or try to comfort the house. I told the friends I was playing with online that I had to leave because something was getting into a trash. And they laughed. They don't live nearly as far away as we do. I laughed with them because all day I watch animals go through trash. When I saw what was outside though, I stopped laughing. It looked a lot like a person when I pulled back the curtain rug into the trash can. Like a person, but completely covered in fur. It was not at all shaped like a bear. It must have become hard for me to breathe. One of my friends could still hear me and asked if I was okay. Just telling them to wait one more second was all I could say. The thing came out of the trash can and stared straight into the window, as if it had heard me. Its eyes were bright, and its face was awful. It looked like a werewolf, but it was more like a person than a dog. From what I could see, it was about 7 feet tall and stood on its back legs. I couldn't look away from it. The thing wiped its mouth or something, and he was tearing through the trash while looking at me. I was too tired to think, and I forgot that my friends were on the line with me. They tried to get my attention, but all I could do was stand there and think about how I had seen things earlier or how I was going to die. It looked like the Christmas lights in the window and the tree were still on. I set down my controller and reached for the plug while keeping my eyes on this thing. It looked like the fact that I was looking at him made him mad. There was a chance that he would jump on me if I were outside and closer. When I took the lights off the wall, it seemed too scary. He jumped a little and the trash kindled over, making a lot of noise. My mom must have heard me jump out of bed because she did too. Right then, he ran off in the direction of the forest. When my mom came downstairs, she just stood there and stared at me. She must have seen it too, but she didn't want to scare me because she wasn't sure if I had seen it or not. Friends who were still on the headset tried to get my attention. I woke up and told them I had to leave. We both went outside to get the trash can and the trash. We didn't say a word to each other the whole time. I saw a lot, but I don't know how much she saw. I no longer even like living here. I'm already planning to move to the city to live with my sister. And it must be better than being here where this thing lives. I really hope it never gets me. This fall, and good luck to me no matter what I saw last fall. In October 2020, whether it was a dogman, a werewolf, or a weirman, it must have really wowed it up. To begin, my dad and I put up big salt blocks for the deer around here every year. Every year, we always get a lot of deer, mostly nice 4 and 5 pounder bucks. We didn't see many last fall though, and I'm not sure why. Until we came across this thing. My dad has set up several deer stands on the far back side of our land. Each one faces a different direction and is spaced about a half-mile apart. I'm not sure which one he was in, but I think he got a good look at a 4-legged animal, fired, and saw it get killed by a big being that my dad told me looked like Anubis. Anubis was human, like the Egyptian gods, but his head was covered in black fur and had very sharp, dog-like features. He also had very big hands and claws on his feet and hands. My dad was so scared that he got down from his deer stand and went back up to the house and told me what had happened. A little over 2 hours later, this thing came up the tree line and watched the couple that was in the salt block. It was easy to see. That thing looked very dangerous and angry. I think it might have thought we were trying to steal its food. After a short time, it seemed to move away, so we left it alone. Exercise heels or even long hours with a .45. I think my dad refused to hit a relative coming through our house on 2 legs that night when it tried to come up to our house. He shot at it several times with his .45 in the same way that someone would run. Like me, my dad likes to act quickly and think about what he did later. We don't care what it is or where it came from as much as we care if it is unfriendly. Are they going to attack us or try to kill us? That's all we need to know before we start shooting at it. Even though everything is very scary, our lives are more important than asking questions. Even though it looked like a .45 was used to hit it, our shots didn't seem to do much harm. It was also odd that there was no blood. Since then, we haven't seen it, and within a few days, there were no more deer. For the rest of the season, we haven't seen any, not even does. From now until the beginning of March, it's still very rare not to see one. We looked everywhere and couldn't find any signs of them, not even deer droppings. This place is always full of doe in the winter and fall. A few game cams were even set up right outside the salt block. Nothing. Things are going on a bit strangely. We think that whatever this Anubis wolf thing was has either eaten or run off with all the deer in the area. It no longer tries to break into our house or attack us, which is good. It tried to attack my dad and me in October, which was the last time we saw it. It's possible that we scared it away and it took all the deer in the area with it. In Oklahoma City, at the start of the summer of 2020, I think I saw a wolf puppy. It's not scary, however, I had never heard of Dogman before this event. In any case, I'm a homeless drug addict, and the reason I'm telling you this is that I had to meet my dealer early that morning around 6 a.m., and I was walking next to a big highway. I could not see the cars going by because of how the turnpike was made. I was walking about 700 yards away from where I wanted to go. It was a drop to the road. The road was at the bottom and the off-ramp was at the top. The road has a fence that sits on top of a cement wall, and it goes like this until you reach the off-ramp. This is what I'm telling you because that's where I saw the Dogman pop. I was getting closer to where I wanted to go. When I got to this point in the drums where the off-ramp is, I was looking down at the highway, and off into the distance, a big-headed puppy was pulling itself up to this hole in the fence. I think it made the hole so it would be easy to get to. I say easy because if you run across the street, there's a strip mall with a few restaurants. If you go down the alley, that's where the trash is kept, and it's exactly where it was going. In other words, the hole is right next to where the alley starts. In the place where I saw it, I was walking, and all of a sudden I thought, wow, I just saw this big-headed puppy. It looked like a puppy, so I think it's a pup. How can you tell if the dog is a baby, a young gark, or older? It pulled itself up to the side of the cement wall, where the fence is. The fence has a big hole in it where it is sitting. His front 2 paws were up on the wall, pulling itself up. He was in the middle of the hole. It seems like when you pull yourself up on the side of a swimming pool, it was about halfway up, and I looked over and thought, man, you know, it looks really smart, like it's very smart. It didn't seem mean, it looked shocked. It looked like it was thinking, man, I've been seeing it. I looked back at where the dog was and said, let's look for a second. I didn't blink or do anything else. It was no longer there. It was like it at the time, and I had never heard of Dogman. I knew of Bigfoot, but not any other creepy crawlies. I was on YouTube at the time and started watching a few different feeds. One of them had a story about this creature. Then I thought about the puppy with the big head I had seen that morning. It looked funny having such a big head and a small body. Not the most scary, but it's big and not too tall. I remember that it had blue eyes and looked very smart. The fur was gray and looked really thick. It had white tips all over it. Its mouth was closed, so I couldn't see its teeth or lips. It had ears on top of its head, shaped like a pimple when they're cut. The tips of its ears had just a few curls of fur. I couldn't see the bottom part of it, but the front paws looked like they had long nails that were being used like hands. By the way it was pulling its hands off the wall and itself made it look like it couldn't believe it was caught. I think it was going to the alley trash can with a register trash. It wasn't that dangerous once it was fully pulled up because it had only crossed a few lines of traffic and was now in an alley. It was still dark enough to go through the trash for another 30 minutes. Anyway, I'm sorry if this went back and forth. I'm sorry I didn't really sit down and write a statement, but I hope you get the main point of my story. It has been a few Novembers since this happened, but it's still very scary. It makes me feel really bad to type it out, but I think it's important to share this story because it really disproves the idea that monsters don't exist that I had as a kid. Because what I saw with my friend that night looks like something from a Stephen King book. A close family friend of mine, with whom I've been friends for a long time and still am, had her boyfriend of 6 years cheat on her and then dump her. She was very upset and didn't want to be alone. I told her I would stay at her place for the weekend since I had nothing planned myself and was free. But it would give her something to think about and lift her mood. I showed up and the three of us had a girls' night. We watched movies, ate popcorn, and did anything else that would take her mind off of her ex-boyfriend. Because she didn't have a lot of money, she ended up with this small podang property that was kind of on the edge of town. There are a lot of trees nearby, but the outside is still very pretty. It wasn't run down or anything, it was just very small. She lived there by herself, and her ex would visit her sometimes when they were together. What else could you want? My phone's battery was about 9–10% charged when I realized I had left my charger and cord in the car while I was away for the weekend. It was around 11 or midnight. I went outside to get them and all of my things because I was staying for the weekend. That's when I saw what looked like a werewolf. After walking out onto her front porch and pressing the unlock button, both the front porch light and my car's light turned on at the same time, lighting up the whole area. Before I pressed the button and opened the door, it was completely dark. When both lights turned on, I screamed and was shocked by what I saw. It looked like a really tall dog was coming up behind my car, about 6 feet behind me. I felt like I was in slow motion right away, and my brain was working hard to make sense of what it was seeing. The most lifelike werewolf outfit I had ever seen was right in front of me. But as it moved, I could see the muscles working under its skin. I could also tell it was breathing and moving toward me. It seemed like something from a Stephen King book or movie, which I would know. As a kid, I read a lot of his books. I love his writing. That's why he was the first thing I thought of when I saw this book about werewolves, which I think is called Silver Bullet. I screamed, turned around, locked the door, and went back inside. As I struggle with my keys to lock the door upon my return to the house, my friend, who is both interested and scared, runs to the window to see what's going on. Then she starts to scream and asks me, "What is that thing out there?" I sees it too. When she does that, the blinds close and both of us run into the kitchen, grab the biggest knife she has, and cry together in a ball. We hear this thing walk to the back door where her sliding glass door is, like a guy would on 2 legs, in less than a minute. That one was lucky because it had blinds too, and it was trying to open the door very hard, like it knew what the handles were for. I'd never seen a costumed person look so real, so either this was a real monster or it was just a person in a suit. It hit the door very hard and then stopped, maybe after 10 or 15 seconds. Walked around the house a few more times, trying to hit the windows with light blows because I think it could if it wanted to. This thing was strong enough to break a window, but it was like trying to break into a house by finding a weak spot. It wiggled the front door handle very hard at one point, as if it was trying to get free. It didn't happen. There were times when we didn't hear it at all, but we were still too scared to get off the kitchen floor. We chose to stay put even though we were still scared and crying, and the only sounds were the TV and the outside world. We heard a couple of very clear pops about 12 minutes later. I remember this because I was looking at the clock on the oven, which was right next to us on the floor and easy to see. Something being blown up or 2 big balloons popping at the same time. Then there was quiet. We did not hear anything. As the night went on, my friend and I fell asleep next to each other, our knives still in our hands. I woke up first. I woke up my friend by telling her, "We made it. It's morning." The light is going out. It was around 7:45 or 8 a.m. at this point. The sun is rising a little later than usual because it's almost winter up here in the north. Since I had an Android and she had an iPhone, I had to go get my charger. I wasn't going to let my friend stay here while I figured something out. But at the time, she didn't have a car and mostly took rides to and from work. As I walked to my car, I noticed something very scary. My two back tires on my Prius were flat, even though the sun was up and I wasn't afraid to go outside in the dark. I was shocked. I went over to look at them. At first glance, it looked like someone had cut them, but when I looked more closely, I saw that something big had bit into them and popped them. There were huge holes in both of the back tires, and they were totally flat. I had used my spare tire about a year or two ago and never put it back on. I finally called the tow truck to cut a long story short. I asked the guy to tell me what he thought about what happened. His words were, either a very mean bear bit these back tires or you ran over some spite. There was a change. Anyway, I brought my friend back to my place, where she stayed for 2 weeks before going back to her house for a few days. After that, she was going to stay with her family for a few months before moving up there forever. Though she finally went back down, but only for a day or two to get her things. She never stayed the night. We do not talk about what happened that night. We saw something that looked like a woolly, hairy, shaggy wolf. I wish I knew more about it, that I'm not a scientist. Thanks for reading about my experience. The very least it should have done was make us laugh, even if it cost us and our friend money. I am certain that I saw a dogman when I was 18 years old and a senior in high school. It happened near my house, no more than 2 miles away. My girlfriend and I used to go back into the woods where there were rolling hills with white oak and fir trees and not many people. The view was lovely. My girlfriend and I would even go back to those woods and make out. The outdoors was a place that both she and I loved to spend time because we were both nature lovers. And because I grew up in a small town, there wasn't much to do, especially to get away from our parents and friends who were always trying to take up too much of our time. So, when we saw the dogman, it was just another afternoon. It was sunny and clear and the temperature was probably in the high state. It was either late April or early May. I was a senior and I was going to graduate in about 5 or 6 weeks, whenever that was. I believe it was around the beginning of June. She was a junior when I met her. For sure, there is no way that someone could have thought that they saw a bear when the weather is so clear, sunny, and bright. I've seen a black bear here a lot of times. A lot of times I've seen black bear tracks, I know what a black bear looks like. Some friends I've told this story to don't believe what I saw, but it was definitely not a black bear. Anyway, my girlfriend and I are sitting under this old half-dead tree and talking. We're probably lost in our thoughts when I look behind her and see a tall, dark figure coming toward us from one of the hills a ways away. In the first few seconds, I was a little surprised because I thought someone else had come back to where we were. From what I know, no one really comes back here for any reason. Since our town is so small, we didn't have many poor people, so there weren't any bums or addicts back here. But since those thoughts were over in a matter of seconds, my brain had time to fully understand what I was seeing. And after being stuck in conversation for no more than 2 seconds, I knew this wasn't a person at all. But it was way too big. Animal had 2 legs and a big dog or wolf head with 2 tall ears that looked like those on a German shepherd. It's very black and fuzzy, especially around the head and neck. It looks a bit like a German shepherd's hair, though its body is much thinner but still lean. When I told my girlfriend, look at that, what kind of animal is that? My brain was able to understand all of this in about 4 seconds. She turns around and gasps as the thing gets on all fours and runs toward us. That's how I think. That's all we did. When I yelled, we both got up and ran back toward my house. We were sitting on top of the hill, south-facing down. My house was north of us, up the hill behind us. It was coming from the west and going straight at us, or perpendicular. This thing would have had to go up the hill to chase us if it was going north, but it didn't. We didn't look back when we ran up the hill to see if it was still after us. We couldn't see it from the top of the hill after we got there. Because we were both scared and out of breath, we chose to stop and walk back to the house once we were sure it wasn't following us. It was the first time I had seen an animal walk on two legs and then drop down on all fours so easily and with such ease. I would guess that this thing was no more than 100 feet away when it first showed up over the hill to our west. It saw us for sure, that much I know. It was facing the direction of us. I think it walked about 20 to 30 feet, then dropped to all fours so smoothly that it looked like it had changed its whole structure and bone position. It then started running very quick. One reason we booked it was because of that. By the time we got to the top of the hill, it was gone. It must have either gone down into the hill, where trees are farther apart and fewer in number, making it harder for the scene to hide, or it ran into the thicker forest to our left or east. I have no idea where it went or why we didn't see it. Our minds were either making it up or it was moving so quickly that it disappeared into the thick brush. I saw it with my girlfriend and we both told the same story about what happened. I really don't think we were just hallucinating that something like this was happening. We didn't tell my parents or any of my friends at first, and it probably wasn't until a few years later when she and I were both in college that we told everyone what we saw. That would have been in the early 2000s, when the Beast of Bray Road and Dogman in general were becoming more well-known. In fact, that's how I kinda knew it was a Dogman. We also never heard it coming or stepping on the ground. It didn't make any noise when it got down on all fours either, whether it was running, thudding, or moving. Well, it sounds like there was no sound at all, which is very creepy. Couldn't give you any specifics about its face because I haven't seen it up close. But if you look at a lot of pictures of what people draw as a Dogman on Google or other websites, it looks a lot like that. The only difference is that it wasn't built like Arnold Schwarzenegger or a big body. From far away, its head looked like the head of a black German shepherd or wolf. It was pretty skinny, but still lean. It was tall and lanky than anything else. Also, I didn't see any teeth or eyes. In the late 1990s, you didn't really talk about these things because you were afraid of being made fun of. When I finished from high school and started college with my girlfriend, we broke up and moved to different parts of the country. Because we were still best friends, we kept in touch. Now that we have our own families, we still do. She still lives in the Midwest, while I live on the West Coast. We still sometimes talk about how scary it was. I know for sure that they are real creatures, but I have no idea what they are, where they came from, how they act, or what they eat. A friend from work let my dad rent out a house when I was about 12 years old. A dirt road was the only way to get to it from the outside world. I wasn't really excited about going, but I chose not to tell them. I didn't want to make my dad mad. Dad liked being outside. Grandpa, his dad, took him hunting, swimming, and doing other fun things when he was young. He thought it would be fun to share those experiences with me. Dad didn't care that I was a girl. Dad brought some important things with him, but he planned to buy some things we would need along the way. Someone told him that there was a general shop about 10 miles from the cabin. That's why we bought things like bread, milk, firewood, and anything else we might need. The cabin didn't seem to have power, so we would have to use our fireplace to heat it. Dad even brought his .22 Winchester gun and a small revolver with him. I thought that one day we would go hunting. I had never shot a gun before, but my dad told me it wasn't hard and that we could practice without much trouble. He said having to hit something was hard. We planned to come back the following week after leaving on a Thursday. Most of the ride I dozed off. When I woke up, we were at the general store. It was the guy at that point. Dad got what he needed and then we went to the cabin. Even with the headlights on, you could only see a few feet in front of you on the dirt road that led to the house. Dad was very careful to stay away from any rocks or bumps that could damage the tires. It was really hard to see the road. Branches from trees were moving along the car. I tried to see what was in the trees, but I couldn't. Once we got to the cabin, Dad got a few flashlights out of the closet. At night, it was dark and cold outside. We took everything out of the car and put it inside. The house wasn't very big. There were 2 cots, a wood stove, a fireplace, shelves with plates and tin cups, a bench, and a lot of spider webs. The cabin looked like it hadn't been used in a long time. I was really scared by it. But Dad liked it and said it felt more country. After putting everything away, we went to sleep. I said, "Yes, Dad, I'd like to take the beds outside to see the stars better." "No," I said. He laughed. We both fell asleep. It was nice the first few days. But we hung out, got up early, and made breakfast. I went hiking in that area. I learned how to make a fire from my dad. I learned how to use a guide in case I got lost. Some of the trees were even hit with the guns. Even though I was ready to go hunting, my dad thought I should practice more before we went. He also insisted that we get a license, but I didn't care. Dad even gave me my first beer. I'll never forget how bitter it tasted and how warm it made me feel. After that, we'd take the bench from the house outside, set up the empty bottles, and shoot some more. I wasn't looking forward to the first trip, but I loved it in the end. Since Dad worked all the time, it was the first time in a very long time that we actually spent time together. We would make s'mores at night, and my dad would tell me stories about his first loves, enemies, and tricks he and his friends played as kids. When the first 3 days were over, I was scared to take my cot outside to sleep to show my dad how tough I was. Dad came with me, and the two of us would look up to see if we could see a shooting star. That scary forest started to turn into something lovely. One night, my dad and I both couldn't sleep. There was a lot of wildlife around, but we never saw or heard any of it. Bugs, sure, but never mice or deer. Dad was afraid of drawing bears, so whenever we went hiking, he made sure our food was safe, but we never saw anything. He told us to get our flashlights and go for a short walk to blow off some steam since neither of us could sleep. That might help us fall asleep. I wasn't scared of the night anymore, so I was ready for it. Even so, Dad told us to bring the gun and the .22 just in case we ran into something not so friendly. I jumped out of bed, ready to go. To make sure we don't lose each other, Dad told me to stay close. I wrapped the .22 around my pants waist. Dad told me in a joke not to shoot myself. My dad held a flashlight in his hand and swung the rifle's strap around his shoulder. I was right behind them with my own flashlight. We chose to walk along to a small creek we had found. Since it was only 30 minutes away, they went back because they thought the hour-long trip would be enough. A bad smell was coming from somewhere near the creek when we got there. I've never smelled anything so bad. It was easy to figure out. A deer was lying a few feet away with its face torn off and its body had been cut up. My dad was scared by this. He thought that a bear must have done it. As we turned around to go back, my dad stayed in front of me. It felt cold to me when the .22 hit my gut. I'd shown the flashlight everywhere to see if there was a bear following us, and I ran into my dad. He had already stopped. He told me not to ask him why he stopped. The beam of his flashlight was aimed at a bear. As it ate a deer, its back was to us. It hadn't seen us yet. With its attention on its food, Dad told me to move slowly, and we did so as we moved around the animal. The stick broke under my foot and the bear threw itself all over the place. I thought I knew it wasn't a bear. With the light on, its face looked like a dog's. Because it was hunched over, it looked like a bear. The animal then stood up on its back legs and was taller than both of us put together. It had long hair, arms, and legs and was wild and shaggy. But the animal took a step toward us and growled angrily. Dad pulled out the gun and fired 3 shots into the air. The animal was scared by this. It got down on all fours and hid in the bush. I quickly ran back to the house with my dad to get as many of our things as we could. Then we drove back home right away. I haven't seen anything like it since then. With age, whenever my dad and I talked about what we had seen, he was sure it was a bear because the lighting and shadows made it look bigger than it really was. I'm not sure about it myself, and I don't think he is either. What do you think? Are you sure we didn't just see a bear?